All right, let's jump into part B of Titus 1 from stage 29 of Cambridge Latin. It's a little bit shorter than part A, so we should be able to get through it pretty quickly. All right, so post eos venerunt juvenes qui trientitaros coronis ornatos ad sacrificium ducebat. So post eos, last translation we translated post as behind. Here we're going to translate it as after. Both are reasonable. It's just you have the latitude to translate it in whichever way fits. So after them, and this is referring back to the previous sentence where we're talking about the trumpeters that are leading this procession. So after these guys, after them, came the youths. So the youths, juvenes, is the nominative subject of venerant, perfect tense verb. And then we have this relative clause of characteristic right here, introduced by qui, that is modifying, or its antecedent is juvenes. So qui trientitaros coronis ornatos ducebant. So they were leading, imperfect tense verb, who were leading trientitaros, 30 bulls. This is a direct object of ducebant. Notice that trigenta, 30, since it's a numeral, it's indeclinable. It's not changing its form based on based on whether they're feminine, whether it's masculine or neuter. It's always, and it's also not going to change with case. So trigenta tauros, it's modifying the accusative plural tauros, and it will do this for any other word. So who were leading 30 bulls, and then ornatos, we've got a participial phrase, and notice that this is something that we've seen in the past couple of translations. We've got the two words that are in the participial phrase sandwiched between the participle and the noun that the participle is modifying. Remember that participles are verbal adjectives. So the bulls are what kind of bulls? Bulls that are decorated. Decorated how? And with garlands. This is sorry, not two words, one word in this. In previous times we've seen a couple of words in that participial phrase. There's only one right here. This ablative plural, coronis, so with garlands. It's an instrumental ablative. And then finally, prepositional phrase to the sacrifice. So putting it all together, after them came the young men who were leading 30 bulls decorated with garland. Decorated with garlands to the sacrifice. All right, next sentence. Then tum multi servi, so nominative plural, many slaves, and then another relative clause introduced by qui portabant, who were carrying, imperfect tense verb, gazam judaiorum. So Gaza right here, this is a fairly uncommon word. It means treasure. It is called treasure because of the city of Gaza, and everyone probably knows about the Gaza Strip and some of the conflict that's still happening there. Anyway, it was a very, very rich city in the ancient world, so it became synonymous with treasure or with luxury. It's kind of today we might call something like that's Gucci. That's a little bit probably dated by this point, but if at least when I was a little bit younger, saying something was Gucci meant that it was high, very expensive. I mean, I know that it's still a brand that's around. Anyway, so the treasure, judaiorum, of the Jews, genitive plural, it's possessive there. So let's go to the next part. So we don't need to have the main verb yet. That's just a verb for this qui clause. Primam pompe partem claudebant. So the main verb here is claudebant. They were, so the many slaves were, well, claudo, so usually means to block. We get words like claustrophobic from this. And we actually get the word clause because the clause is separate from another clause. But in this context, it means to complete or conclude. So the many slaves were concluding or completing the first part, primum partem pompi. This is a genitive right here, genitive singular. So the first part of the procession. So putting it all together, then many slaves who were carrying treasure of the Jews we're concluding the first part of the procession. Next sentence, huius Gazai pars pretiosissima erat mensa sacra tubae candelabrum quae omnia arunt erat. So huius, huius is a genitive form of hic haec hoc, and we're starting to see more of these other forms. At first we just really saw the nominatives and the accusatives. So we've got a genitive here, and huius is going with Gazai here. Of these treasures, or so of this treasure, sorry, singular, of this treasure, the parts, pretiosissima, most precious. So really, pars pretiosissima is the subject of this. The most expensive part of this treasure, then the imperfect tense verb, was erat. And then these are the three things that make up that part. The mensa sacra, the sacred table. The tubae, so the tubas, not tubas, the horns. And candelabrum, so the candelabra. So candelabra obviously is a modern word, but it's sort of an ornate lamp. Quae, of which, omnia, so all of which, we've got another genitive form of qui here. And this is a qui clause, by the way, modifying these three things. All of which erant aurae, were gold, all of which were gold. So putting it all together, the most precious part of this treasure was a sacred table, horns, and a candelabra, all of which were gold. Now notice that most of these words, so mensa, tuba, candelabrum, and omnia aurae, they're all nominative because erat and erant, they're copulate verbs, so they don't take direct objects. So let's go to the next sentence. Septem captivi iudeae qui media in pompa incerebant aspectoribus vehementer deridebantur. All right, so subject right here is septem captivi iudeae. So septem is a numeral, it's indeclinable, it's modifying captivi iudae. So 7 Jewish captives. So 7 Jewish captives, another relative clause. Qui media in pompa incerebant. So who, and then here's our imperfect verb, were marching in media pompa, in the middle of the procession. Now, I know that I'm translating that like a genitive. They're both media and pompa are obviously locatival ablatives, but it's better to translate it as that. It's more natural in English than saying in mid-procession. Also notice that that preposition is cutting the middle of these two. It's in between media and pompa again. So these captives, these 7 captives, here's our main verb down here after this relative clause, deridebantur, were being laughed at. They were being mocked or were being derided, vehementer, violently or aggressively. It's an adverb right there. And then we've got, since this is a passive voice verb, we've got an ablative of agent introduced by a spectoribus, by the spectators. So altogether, let's read this as the 7 Jewish captives who were marching in the middle of the procession were being mocked violently by the spectators. Next sentence, quinque liberi, the 5 children. So this is the subject, and also quinque, indeclinable because it is a numeral, so it's just modifying liberi. The 5 children, and then a participial phrase. We don't have a relative clause here. We've got a participial phrase, the present active participle incedentes, marching Serena Woltu, so we've got two ablatives here, with serene, with calm. And then Woltus means kind of like face, but more like countenance or disposition. So they were marching with calm expressions. These are ablatives, instrumental ablatives. And then let's jump forward and let's see what our main verb is. We've got all the way down here, neglegebant. So these 5 children were ignoring, and what were they ignoring? These 2 accused plurals, the shouts and insults or mocks, presumably the same ones from the spectatoribus up here. So let's then we've got this next one right here, said. It's joining another main clause up with these guys. Said, duae feminae plurimis lacrimis spectatores orbant ut liberis parceret. So, but the 2 women, this is the subject, were begging, orabant, this is an imperfect verb, were begging. And who are they begging? The spectatores, the spectators. And how are they doing it? With these 2 ablatives, another instrumental ablatives, with many tears, plurimis lacrimis. And since there is the verb for begging, we're expecting this ut, we're expecting a result clause. What are they hoping to gain by begging? They were praying, begging that they might spare, begging them to spare their children. So parcere is an interesting verb you see a lot in church Latin, in later liturgical Latin, and it means to spare or be kind to. And when you translate it as be kind to or have mercy on, it's a little bit easier to construe it with a dative, as it is here. Notice that it's liberis, that it's the object. And as we've seen this passage and the passage before it, has been having a lot of verbs that take datives. So let's put it all together. So the 5 children, marching with calm expressions, were ignoring the shouts and mocks. But the 2 women were begging the spectators with many tears to have mercy on their children. You have to put there in brackets if you want to include it in your translation. So post captivus, another post we've got after the captives, came Domitianus, venet Domitianus ipse, came Domitian himself. Curo magnifico vectus. So we've got a participial phrase modifying Domitian, right? And that is being carried, and then 2 instrumental ablatives, by a magnificent chariot. So he's riding on a big chariot. Putting it all together, after the captives came Domitian himself, carried by a magnificent chariot. Another post, post imperatorem ibant ambo consules, quorum alter erat L. Flavius Silva. So after the emperor, both ambo consules, so ambo means both, so like ambidextrous, both consuls, and remember in Rome, especially before the imperial period, the consular rank was pretty much the highest. And in order to create kind of an ancient system of checks and balances, there were 2 consuls. So they maintained having 2 consuls in the imperial period, and they were really the second highest tier of rulers, if you will, after the emperor. So both consuls, ibant, imperfect form of eo, to go, but here we'll translate as were walking. So let's see right after this, we've got this quorum. So quorum is introducing a qui clause describing one of the consuls, but it's a genitive, as you noticed, it's a partitive genitive. And then we have alter. Alter is actually the subject of the verb inside of this qui clause. So I know that alter is usually translated as the other, but here, since it doesn't really make sense to say the other, we'll say one. So one of which was Lucius Flavius Silva. So we'll put it all together. So after the emperor, both consuls were walking, one of which was Lucius Flavius Silva. So almost there, we've got 2 more sentences. Magistratus nobilissime effigiam Titi in humilis portabat. So magistratus. Magistratus is, guess what, another 4th declension noun. I know it doesn't look like it. It's glossed in the book as magistrate. It does not give you a clue that this is also a nominative plural, 4th declension. The only key that you have is portabat being a plural verb, an imperfect plural verb. So the magistrates were carrying, and what were they carrying? The effigium, the image, so the statue, and then of most noble Titus. Now, it's actually possible to construe nobilissime with both Titus and magistratus, because magistratus is a nominative plural that is 4th declension, but it's masculine, and nobilissime could be a 2nd declension adjective that is nominative plural. So you can construe it either way. I'm going, and I'm if you notice, I'm construing it with Titus, because it's both these 2 genitives are sort of framing the effigium. I think that's more likely what they're doing here. So the magistrates were carrying the image of most noble Titus in humeris, so locatival ablative, on, in brackets, their shoulders. So I'll put it all together. The magistrates were carrying the statue of most noble Titus on their shoulders. Last sentence, a militibus pompa claude bator. So again, we've got the use of claudo as concluding or completing. So the pompa, nominative subject, the procession, was being completed, and then ablative of agent, by soldiers. So the procession was being completed by soldiers. Very, very interesting. Titus, Vespasian and Titus are obviously really, really important figures, because we haven't really gone over this much, but Julius Caesar, and more notably Octavian or Augustus, start a dynasty of emperors called the Julio-Claudians, and they maintain power until Vespasian and Titus institute a new ruling family of emperors called the Flavian dynasty, and they're the first ones in this. So they're really, really important figures in Roman history for that. Also, we'll be able to see these figures in all sorts of media throughout history. Everything from Robert Graves' Claudius to even Mozart's opera La Clemenza di Tito, and that is Titus. So definitely worth reading up on the history from this period. If you have any questions about the grammar or anything like that, just make sure to drop me an email. Otherwise, that is the second part of Titus 1.